Hey everyone, KYT here, doing another quick video, this time on the FTQ, an RRSP program that's exclusive to Quebec residents. And I'm going to be talking about this because the content that's out there on this particular fund, most of it on YouTube, if not all of it, is in French. So hopefully I'm going to be providing value to those English-speaking residents that are considering putting their funds into this program. But before I do, I just want to recommend you sign up to QUESTRADE if you haven't already, and let's just jump into my account to see why. So here we are inside of my QUESTRADE with a special guest. Usually I push WEALTHSIMPLE, but QUESTRADE is an essential tool in your arsenal because it's the only one where you can have a self-directed RRSP at the current time. And it also has the FHSA, the first home savings account, which other places don't have. I don't think WealthSimple still has a waiting list, I believe. And we can check out her account right now. So she hasn't turned 2 yet, it's like just turned 1. $6,500 if we round it up, and that's more than I had when, I didn't have this much money until I was like 20 or something. So good job, well done. Well done, yeah. Well done, Professor June. And on top of that, if you use the link in the description below, we both get $50. So why not? Okay, it's FTQ time, but let's go back to the browser once again. So while doing my research on FTQ, I did find some videos in French on it. That's why I find value in me making this video, because it's the only one that's going to be English out there. Did want to give a special shout out to this Joe finance person, because I think after watching a few of his videos, besides this FTQ one, I think he does a very good job in his videos, well researched, and they're great. So we're here on the FTQ website, which stands for Fonds de Solidarité in French. And if you scroll down, they call it the RRSP Plus program. And where do your funds go when you're investing in them? They're investing it to support the local economy. So from what I know, they invest from small to medium-sized Quebec businesses. So if you feel like supporting local businesses, why not? This is one of the perks. But the main thing that you hear about when you hear about this program is the 30% tax savings. So if I scroll all the way down, if you contribute $5,000, which is the max, and you can change the taxable income here, it doesn't really matter what you choose, but it's trying to show you that you get $1,500 more. So this is your tax return with a traditional RRSP, but if you put $5,000 in the RRSP Plus of the FTQ, you get $1,500 more, which is significant. It's essentially, if you're getting a tax return, if you don't owe the government money, you're getting $1,500 plus, like no question asked, actual free money. So 30% return on that 5K. Now, of course, we have to compare it to what another viable option or a typical option you would do with the $5,000. So if you invested the $5,000 in a regular RRSP, what happens? Now, almost every video I looked at, every Reddit thread used putting $5,000 in an RRSP under VFV, the S&P 500, as the main comparison, as the benchmark. So it's not really fair, of course, because if you look at the last 10 years, the S&P 500 has beaten almost anything that you throw at it. So that doesn't mean, 10 years is not actually a lot. It's a lot in the time sense, but it's not a lot to figure out future performance, right? That's why you read a lot. Past returns don't represent future performance type of thing, because it doesn't. The S&P has an amazing run, but doesn't mean those market conditions will happen again in the future. But nevertheless, it's good to take a quick look. So if we just take a quick look at the 10-year number for the VFV S&P, we get 14.61%. Go back to the FTQ, they say 7%. That's a huge gap. Again, we don't expect, if that's that big of a gap, then the S&P 500 will catch up to the FTQ even with the $1,500. It'll only take a few years before having 5,000 with no bonus will outperform 5,000 in FTQ plus 1,500. Even if that 1,500 was put into the S&P as well, eventually the S&P will outperform. Now, there's a lot of different variables still, because we're assuming, again, in this specific example, that you're comparing 5,000 in a regular RRSP invested in VFV versus 5,000 in the FTQ RRSP Plus, and the 1,500, the money, the value that you get, it really depends where that's being put. Is that also being put in the S&P 500? And also, what type of account? Is it in a TFSA? Is it you actually have more RSP room, so you can put it in a regular RSP and invest in S&P? Or is it in a taxable account? So those numbers will change. But overall, the message that I've seen with all these comparisons is that the S&P 500 will outperform it could be from 5, like I've seen people do the math, depending on, again, the percentage gap from 5 to even 25 years. So if it's in the 20-25 year range, it's not going to be a huge difference when you think about it. Like I'm 38, right? 2025, that's like 58, 63 year zone where I'm about to retire anyways. So if the difference in performance only happens then, does it really matter? There are a few reasons to believe that the S&P 500 or other ETFs would outperform the FTQ. And one of them is, of course, the expense ratio. Here we have for the FTQ, 1.65%. Something like VFV, we're talking about a much lower fee at 0.09%. So that's one of the reasons. And another reason is that not 100% of the FTQ portfolios is in stocks. And they define it here, not that it's necessarily a bad thing. If we scroll here, we can see as of May 31, 2022, all such investments represented 44% of the Fonds de Solidarité FTQ's assets under management. At this same date, 41% of these other investments were composed of a cash and money market portfolio and a bond portfolio. Those securities generate, among other things, interest income. The remainder was invested in Canadian and international global equity portfolios. So you have some amount of money in cash, money market, and bond portfolio, which is fine. It's less volatile than 100% stocks like the S&P 500, like XEQT. But if you're early in your investing life and you want to go full stock, then you might want to do that because that has historically and it seems to have projected for the future higher future expected returns. So let's try to wrap it up a bit about what's to take away. I don't think, again, for a lot of people that have funds already invested in it, it's no big deal. I think it's very likely it's going to take a long time before the performance is that different in the future. It could likely take 20, 25 years. But the reason why I wouldn't invest in it after all, or make it a big part of my portfolio, if you're not new to the channel, you know I value global diversity. So some people that learn about this fund at an early age, they just, let's say, have 5,000 only to save, and they just put it into this fund because they hear about the 1,500. It's a good thing. But then it becomes 100% of your portfolio is focused on the performance of Quebec. So whereas I have a friend that likes the FTQ, but he also has a giant portfolio outside of that. So it becomes less of a problem. You have Canada, let's say you have US exposure, international, and then you have FTQ 5,000 being a small part. No big deal again. And for those of you who are already invested in it, who have and are panicking and really want to get out because of all the performance things, the expense ratio, I mean, the 1,500 does even it out a bit. Oh yeah, there is one thing that is missed, I think, by all the videos, but is mentioned by a lot of commenters in those videos that actually invest in this fund, what a good strategy could be in using this fund. Because the gap in performance happens over time and maybe over a long time, people have suggested that maybe you invest in the FTQ when you're really close to retirement, because then you get the free money without worrying about the performance gap because you're about to retire. Or I've also heard the case that you just invest it if you're about to buy a house, because then the 1,500 that you get let's say you plan to buy a house in the next 3 years, the 1,500 over those 3 years can be utilized towards that house. So you're able to change the 1,500 into house equity. So that's something to consider. That's what it seems like. It makes sense for people to either have a purchase really quick or retire really quick. So the rule of thumb is if you're going to use that money in soon, then do it. But if you have this FTQ money for the long run, the outperformance might be too large. Like it might, if the S&P 500 continues to crush, or the Quebec economy, because you're so focused on just one economy with this investment, it might do really bad. It might have a bad run, and then there's a big performance gap. So That's why overall, I wouldn't invest in the FTQ. I might consider it again. I think the late stage investing makes a lot of sense. Oh yeah, before I forget also, all the time, the pro of being able to self-manage, self-direct your own RRSP is that you can withdraw, take money out anytime. You can manipulate the money anytime you want. I'm struggling to say that. But with the, let's go back on the browser, when on this website it says, can I withdraw money from my RRSP Plus before age 65? Only under certain conditions. Now, I've heard that it's been a lot more restrictive in the past. They really like lock you in your funds until you retire. But now they're giving more conditions for you to be able to take the money out. And I've heard in people who have invested in it, it's a lot more flexible than people think. But still, not as flexible as you having the money in QuestTrade or WealthSimple, where you can, in any emergency or anything you want, you can take out that money. So I hope at the end of the video, I gave you something to think about. I do think it's not like the other videos and conclusions, like they would stay the heck away from the FTQ, but I think there are reasons to be in it. And if you're already in it, it's not necessarily a bad thing that you don't need to get out right away. So I'll end this video by showing how using past performance is not the best thing. And I'm on the Blossom app, and then there's some people that compare funds and try to convince people, hey, look, this has better 5-year performance. This has better 10 years. So you should, this is clearly better than the other one. And so, for example, one recent thread I wrote was XIU that I read versus ZEB. So XIU tracks the TSX, Canadian, struggling with words today, Canadian stock exchange versus ZEB, which invests in the Canadian banks in equal weights. Wow, really struggling. And they were comparing, but they're like 5 years, one is better, 10 years, the other is better, right? Between these two. And that's what I'm saying. Or the S&P. That's why a lot of people love the S&P, because it has crushed everything over the last 10 or so years. So if you're using that to base your decisions, your ETF decisions, then it's VFV all day. And there's a reason I don't do that, because 10 years, again, is not enough time, because there's just so many things that happen. People's expectations change, the market changes. There was a pandemic, there's specific situations that happen. And again, things that have gone up high valuations tend to have lower expected returns in the future. So a lot of people do not expect the S&P 500 to continue its run, but it could. Obviously, there's a lot of variance, a lot of randomness, but it's important to, what I stress is not performance, past performance. It's really the strategy of these funds, your overall strategy. So for example, I mentioned the FTQ, heavy Quebec focus. It's 100% Quebec. And so if you want to have that in your portfolio, I don't really look at past performance. I just look at the overall. Maybe add VFV, add VDY. That's a very popular combo. Or add XEQT, my favorite. It could be 95% XEQT, 5% FTQ if you want. So there's a lot of things you can do, strategize to have yourself safer, to have yourself a more predictable return in the future, to make sure you reach your financial goals, to have a higher chance of hitting it consistently. So with that's hopefully it's a good video, and I'll see you in the next one.